Several painting commissions followed David's completion. Michelangelo's only known surviving painting is Doni Tondo, The Holy Family, 1504. Gilbert writes that the painting betrays the artist's fascination with the work of Leonardo. He adds that Michelangelo regularly denied that anyone influenced him, and his statements have usually been accepted without demur. But Leonardo's return to Florence in 1500 after nearly 20 years was exciting to younger artists there, and later scholars generally agreed that Michelangelo was among those affected. Doni Tondo, now housed in the Uffizi in Florence. This is the only finished panel painting by Michelangelo to survive. The painting was commissioned by Agnolo Doni to commemorate his marriage to Maddalena Strozzi, the daughter of a powerful Tuscan family. The Tondo, a circular framed painting, was most likely created during the period after the Doni's marriage in 1503 or 1504, yet before the Sistine Chapel ceiling frescoes were begun in 1508, dating the painting to approximately late 1506 or 1507. Michelangelo presents the Virgin Mary as the most prominent figure in the composition, as she is fixed in the center of the image, sitting directly on the ground without a cushion, suggesting the theme of her relationship to the earth. The grass directly below the figure is green, sharply contrasting to the grassless ground surrounding her. Saint Joseph has a higher position in the image compared to Mary, symbolizing his status as head of the family, an unusual feature in compositions of the Holy Family. Mary is located between his legs, as if he is protecting her. There is some debate as to whether Mary is receiving the Christ child from Joseph or vice versa. Saint John the Baptist, the patron saint of Florence, is often included in Florentine works depicting the Madonna and Child. He is in the middle ground of the panel between the Holy Family and the background. The elements around the family include plants and water. The painting is still contained within its original frame, which Michelangelo is likely to have helped design. The frame is ornately carved and rather unusual for the 5 heads it contains, protruding 3-dimensionally into space. Similar to the nude young men in the background, the meanings of these heads has been subject to speculation. The frame also contains carvings of crescent moons, stars, vegetation, and lions' heads. These symbols are perhaps references to the Doni and Strozzi families taken from each coat of arms. As depicted on the frame, the moons are bound together with ribbons that interlock with the lions, possibly referencing the marriage of the 2 families. There is a horizontal band separating the foreground and background, dividing the Holy Family from the background figures and Saint John the Baptist. The background figures are 5 nudes whose meaning and function are subject to much speculation and debate. The Holy Family is much larger in size than the nudes in the background, and there appears to be water in between the land where the Holy Family and the nudes are situated. The Holy Family all gaze at Christ, yet none of the nudes look directly at him. Instead, they appear more concerned with their own physical beauty, like Roman youths at the gymnasium. During this time of the High Renaissance in Florence, rivalry between Michelangelo and his peers was fierce, with artists competing for prime commissions and the accolades that came with them. Madonna of Bruges. This Madonna and Child sculpture was the only sculpture by Michelangelo to leave Italy during his lifetime. It was bought by Giovanni and Alessandro Moscheroni from a family of wealthy cloth merchants in Bruges, then one of the leading commercial cities in Europe. The sculpture was sold for 4,000 florin. The depiction of the Madonna and Child differs significantly from earlier representations of the subject, which tended to feature the Virgin smiling down at her Son, held in her arms. Instead, Jesus stands upright, almost unsupported, loosely restrained by his mother's left hand, about to step away from his mother. Mary seems almost unaware of her Son, gazing down and away, as if already conscious of his fate. It is believed the work was originally intended for an altarpiece. If this is so, then it would have been displayed facing slightly to the right and looking down. The sculpture was removed twice from Belgium after its initial arrival. The first was in 1794, after French revolutionaries had conquered the Austrian Netherlands during the French Revolutionary Wars, when the citizens of Bruges were ordered to ship it and several other valuable works of art to Paris. It was returned after Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo in 1815. The second removal was in 1944 during World War II, with the retreat of German soldiers who smuggled the sculpture to Germany enveloped in mattresses in a Red Cross truck. The sculpture was discovered 2 years later in Altersee, Austria, and again returned. It now sits in the Church of Our Lady in Bruges, Belgium. Following the attack on Michelangelo Pietà in 1972, the sculpture was placed behind bulletproof glass, and the public can only view it from 15 feet away. Leonardo was, at 23 years Michelangelo Sr., the most celebrated figure of all within the Florentine fraternity of Renaissance masters. But an unspoken rivalry between the two men was well known. In 1503, Piero Soderini, the lifetime gonfaloniere of justice, a senior civil servant position akin to the role of mayor, commissioned both artists to paint opposing walls of the Salone dei Cinquecento in the Palazzo Vecchio. As Gombrich writes, it was a dramatic moment in the history of art where these two giants competed for the palm, and all of Florence watched with excitement the progress of their preparations. Sadly, Soderini abandoned the commission and the paintings. Leonardo's The Battle of Anghiari and Michelangelo The Battle of Cassina were never finished. Leonardo returned to Milan while Michelangelo was summoned to Rome by Pope Julius II. The Battle of Cassina, copy by Aristotile da Sangallo. The Battle of Cassina is a lost work, which was commissioned by Piero Soderini, a statesman of the Republic of Florence. It was intended to be a fresco painted on a wall of the Salone dei Cinquecento in Palazzo Vecchio. The opposite wall was to be decorated by Leonardo da Vinci, who was commissioned to depict the Battle of Anghiari. The two battles were notable medieval Florentine victories, The Battle of Cassina was fought on 28th July 1364 between the troops of Florence and Pisa, resulting in the victory of the former. 1,000 Pisans were killed and 2,000 more were captured. Unfortunately, Michelangelo never completed the painting, though he did produce a complete cartoon of the composition. The cartoon was copied by several artists, the most notable extant copy being by Michelangelo's pupil, Sangallo. Some of Michelangelo's preparatory drawings also survive, along with prints of part of the scene by Marcantonio Raimondi. According to Michelangelo biographer Giorgio Vasari, the original cartoon was deliberately destroyed by Michelangelo rival Bartolomeo Bandinelli due to his jealousy of its fame. Michelangelo chose to depict the scene at the beginning of the battle, as the Florentine army was taken by surprise by the Pisans' initial attack. The artist presents Florentine soldiers bathing naked in the river Arno, responding to a trumpet that warns them of the sudden Pisan assault. As the soldiers emerge from the river and buckle on their armor, they are threatened by shots from the enemy. Several soldiers look or point towards the Pisan position to the left. One soldier has apparently been hit and has fallen back into the river, while others leap into action. This selected scene allowed Michelangelo to depict his favored topic, the naked male figure in varieties of contrapposto. Piccolomini altarpiece. Commissioned by Cardinal Francesco Todeschini Piccolomini, the Piccolomini altarpiece is an architectural and sculptural altarpiece in the left nave of Siena Cathedral. It was built between 1481 and 1485 by Andrea Bregno in Carrara marble, with additions that included 4 niche sculptures by Michelangelo, produced between 1501 and 1504, featuring Saints Peter, Augustine, later reworked as Saint Pius, Paul, and Gregory. The Pitti Tondo, Tondo Pitti, is an unfinished marble relief of the Virgin and Child by Michelangelo in round or tondo form. It was executed between 1503 and 1504 while he was residing in Florence, and is now in the Museo Nazionale del Bargello in Florence. The tondo was worked on during the year in which Michelangelo sculpted his David, having found the time to dedicate to some other paid private commissions. The work was not completed before Michelangelo left Florence for Rome, and never to return. Many details are missing, and the sides of the work are not polished. This sculpture was commissioned by Bartolomeo Pitti. His son Miniato, a monk at Monte Oliveto, donated it to Luigi Guicciardini. In 1564, the art historian, Benedetto Varchi, saw the work in the house of Guicciardini's nephew, Piero. In 1823, the tondo was bought by the Florentine authorities for 200 scudi from the shop of the dealer Fedele Acciai. The tondo entered the collection of the Museo Nazionale del Bargello in 1873 and was placed where it resides, in the Galleria degli Uffizi. In the unfinished tondo, only the heads of Mary and of the baby Jesus are in high relief. Mary is depicted with an open book on her knees. Detail of her eyes is not complete, as in the typical style of Michelangelo, but interpretations suggest that her gaze seems distracted, as if she is looking into the distance and meditating on the fate of her son that is foretold in the scriptures she is reading. The cherub upon Mary's forehead symbolizes her knowledge of the prophecies, as is found in the terracotta relief Madonna with Child, that is attributed to Donatello of Padua and dated to c. 1440. The baby Jesus leans on her in a lively contrapposto, and just visible emerging in the background is a young Saint John the Baptist. Apparently, Michelangelo also was influenced by the now-lost cartoon of Saint Anne by Leonardo da Vinci that was exhibited in Florence at the Santissima Annunziata during the years Michelangelo was working on the sculpture. Both works are based on the interaction between the figures. The central figure of the composition is Mary, sitting on a cube block, resembling that in Michelangelo Madonna of the Stairs. Interpretations have suggested that she seems to bend over in order to fill the space allotted by the tondo, and that her posture gives an impression that she desires to escape from the scene depicted. Her head, in high relief, projects both outward and upward beyond the border of the tondo and turns left to break the rigidity of the vertical axis of her body. The contrast between the unfinished figure of John the Baptist and the relief of the Virgin also gives the work depth. Tade Tondo, depicting the Virgin and Child with the infant St. John on a circular relief. This sculpture is located in the Royal Academy of Arts in Piccadilly, London, and is the only marble sculpture by Michelangelo in Britain. The sculpture was purchased by Sir George Beaumont during a visit to Italy in 1821, and it was bequeathed to the Academy in 1830. The tondo is on display in a purpose-built area on the Sackler wing level of the Royal Academy. The sculpture was carved in Florence from 1504-06. And this tondo depicts a seated Virgin Mary with the baby Jesus dynamically sprawled across her lap, turning and looking back over his right shoulder toward the infant Saint John the Baptist, who stands before him looking down and holding a fluttering bird. When viewing the composition, the eye of the viewer is drawn diagonally along Christ's body, back up that of his mother, follows her gaze across to John, and from his face, back to Christ. John, patron saint of Florence, with his attribute of a baptismal bowl, crosses his arms, perhaps in allusion to the cross. Most likely the bird he holds is a goldfinch, not a dove. Christian symbolism sees in this bird a representation of the Passion. The unfinished portion of the marble below the bird might have been intended to become a crown of thorns. Michelangelo execution with only a point and claw chisel, often driven hard and with great energy, is a combination of techniques that helps create a sense of surface unity unbroken by the use of the drill. The Christ Child, almost completely in full relief, is the only figure that is highly finished, except for the feet. St. John is much less finished. Mary is the least finished, and the background is only roughly executed. One critic declares a belief that these marked variations in texture help establish the relative status of the three figures while creating a sense of compositional depth, all the greater for not being more conventionally finished. Many of Michelangelo's works are unfinished. Circumstances around each being unfinished vary. Critical opinions address some of his unfinished works as if completed, however. The 19th century French sculptor and critic Eugène Guillaume declared that what he labeled as Michelangelo non finito was one of the master's expressive devices in his quest for infinite suggestiveness. Saint Matthew. Saint Matthew is a marble sculpture of Matthew the Apostle by Michelangelo. It was intended for a series of 12 apostles for the choir niches of Florence Cathedral, but was left unfinished in 1506 when Michelangelo moved to Rome to work for Pope Julius II. It is currently part of the collection of the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence.